Hello everyone, and welcome to video number 12 in the Space Blasters 84 tutorial series. This video was going to be the end of the series, but I realized that I can't really fit in both the sound parts and the particle effects without it being somewhat overwhelming. So I'm just going to split it up. There'll be this video, and then the next one we'll put in the particle effects and we'll be done. But let's see how we can incorporate the sound effects into the video game. Let's click on the project and open it up. And let's create a new scene. And let's add a node. And this time we're not going to add a root node. We're just going to go down to the bottom and we're going to grab the sample player and just load the sample player. Because this sound scene, the only thing we need is a sample player that can play the laser, the rocks exploding, and the thrust for the engines of our ship. So we'll need a sample player in order to play the wave samples or the OGG samples. So now that we have it loaded up, we need to pull in the source wave files that I've supplied for you. So let's do that by clicking on Import and click on Audio Sample. And it's asking for where the source is. Let's click on that and let's go into our source folder and go into the audio and the effects. You'll see the explosion, the shoot small, and the thrust wave. If you click on one of them and shift click on the last one, it should highlight them all and you can click open. Now there will be default settings here that you can change if you want. If you want to change the max rate of the sampling for your sound or change it to 8-bit, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to leave everything on the default settings with the exception of normalize. I don't want it to normalize my sounds. Now I need a place to put these sound files for the game, so let's click on the target path icon here. And I don't see a sound folder, so let's go down here and create a sound folder. Okay, let me highlight that and then click on it. Okay, and we'll just call it sound. And we'll select the sound folder because that's where we want to place the resulting audio files for import. So we're going to take them from our source folder and place them in the sound folder that we created. Okay, and then click on import. Now it imported them into the folder, but how do we actually use them in a video game? The audio portion of Godot really caused me the biggest headache. I didn't quite understand the logic of how everything worked, and it's still a little bit strange, but so I'll show you how it goes. So here we have the sample player, and we need to create a sample library. So you would think maybe you would just click on here and load your samples, but that's not how it works. Click on New Sample Library to create a new library. Now that you have a blank library, you need to fill it with the audio files that you imported. So click on this little arrow here, and it will bring up this another screen that has nothing to do with the tabs up top. This is basically like an audio screen, and this is where you'll import a second time you'll import the audio into your sound or sample library. So click on the folder here and go to the sound folder that we just created for our project, and there are the 3 wave files that we imported. You see it's no longer called a wave file but a .smp file. So we can do the same thing, click and shift click to select them all and click open. Now when you do that, it actually imports that into your sample library. So if you want to hear them, you can just go ahead and click on the different sounds here to see what they sound like. And they sound pretty cool. I know from trial and error that I want to adjust the volume, level of volume on these samples. I need the explosion sound to be a little bit louder than normal. So we're going to up this by 15 dB. Also, the laser sound is a little too loud, so we are going to lower that down by a -5 dB. And that should make it so that everything meshes pretty good as far as when the game starts to play. Okay, so now that you have that, I click on this icon. I'm not sure if it's a save icon or what, but I click on that, and then we need to save the scene. So make sure your sample player is selected. Click on scene. Let's click save scene, and let's make sure that we put it in the sound folder. We're going to name it sound. Sound.scene. Okay, so we have our sample player, we have the library, we populated the library with the imported sound files. Now one thing I didn't show you is how do I get how do I transition from this library, sample library view to maybe the 2D view or the 3D view. You'd think that you could just select these tabs, and I'm not sure if this is a bug and maybe changed in the actual 2.0 final version, but clicking on these tabs, you're not going to go anywhere. So the only way I found to get out of this sample library view is just to come over and click on any of the nodes that you have over here in your scene section. So we'll click on the sample player right here, and you'll see that now the library view goes away and we're back to the regular behavior of clicking on the tabs and going where we expect it to go. So there's some settings over here in the inspector, and one of the settings you see here is set to the numeric value of 1. That is basically the sample player can only play one sound at a time. But we've got lasers, multiple lasers at a time, rocks that are going to be exploding at the same time, as well as the sound of the engine of the ship. So we're going to need more than one channel for the sound effects that we're using. So let's up that to, let's just up that to 25 channels so that we can play 25 different samples at the same time. Okay, and the rest of the settings in the inspector we'll leave to the default value. The next thing we'll do is we'll create a script so that we can have some behavior for the sound scene itself. So let's make sure the sample player is selected, and let's create a new script, and it will default to sound.gd in the sound folder. That's fine. We'll click create, and I'm going to just copy some code that I've already created and paste it over here, and we'll just walk through it. It's a little bit faster than me typing it in as we go. So we've got a couple of variables here that relate to the thrust on the ship itself. We need a variable that will tell us whether the sound for the engine is actually playing or not. So we'll use that as a true false value. And we have a variable here called thrust voice num. This variable will hold the integer value of the channel that's playing the thrust sound. So we'll use both of these variables here for playing sound for the engine of our spaceship. So in our function ready, this is where we're going to set up some initial state, right? We're going to use the set process. There's going to be no interaction with the physics engine or anything, so we don't use any fixed process. We just need the regular process. So we'll just set process to true so that we can use the process function. We also need to add 3 new global parameters. We'll need a parameter trigger laser sound for when we want to trigger the laser sound, trigger the rock sound, or trigger the thrust sound. So these are the 3 new globals that we'll be using in the game. In our process function, this is where we're going to check whether or not we should be playing either the laser sound, the rock sound, or the thrust sound. So we check to see if the trigger laser sound is true. So if the trigger laser sound parameter, our global parameter, is true, then go ahead and we're going to use the play function on our sample player. Remember, the script is tagged to the sample player here. So we will use the play function of the sample player to play shoot, and this is a text value, shoot.small, that represents the name of the sample we want to play from the sound library. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. If I click on sample and then come back over here to the sound library, you'll see that the name of my laser here is shoot small. So you have to use a string that represents the name of the samples that you have in your library. Again, to get out of this view, just click on any node over here in the scene. So we play the shoot small sample, and then we set the trigger laser sound to false, so it's ready for being triggered to true again at some later point in the game. We check the same thing to see if the trigger rock sound global variable is true. If it is, then we play the explosion sample, and once we played it, we set the trigger rock sound back to false. The trigger thrust sound is a little bit different in respect to the other two. These are just basically a fire the sample off and forget it. Fire for both the laser and the rock. Just fire it, fire the sample off and forget it. You can't do that with the thrust sound for the spaceship, because we should hear thrust whenever we're holding down one of the arrow keys. But when we let off the arrow keys, well, then we don't want any sound whatsoever. We don't want any of the thrust sound from the ship. So first thing we need to check for is to see if the trigger thrust sound is true. If the trigger thrust sound is true, and if thrust is playing, remember we've created that variable up here to see if the thrust sound is actually playing. If thrust playing equals false, the first time you go through here, it's got to be false. If it is false, then we actually play right here, right? We're going to play the thrust sound just like we played the sound up here. But this function actually will return an integer value that represents the channel that this thrust sound will be playing on. So we're going to assign that integer value that represents the channel that the thrust sound is playing on to thrust voice num, so that we can use that a little bit later. So then we set the thrust playing to true, because at this point in time it's running. The sample is actually playing. Okay. Then we set our global trigger thrust sound to false, so that it's ready to go for another time. Now if the trigger thrust sound is false, if it's false, it's going to hit the else statement here, right? If it's true, it'll go through this code here. If it's false, it'll hit our else statement and it will execute this code. So if I'm not holding down an arrow key, I'm not triggering a thrust sound, then it's going to check to see if the thrust sound thrust playing is true. If it is true, turn it to false, and then we're going to stop we're going to call the stop function on our sample player, passing it the thrust voice number, that is the integer value for the channel that the thrust sound was playing on. So we're basically telling it to stop that. Whatever's playing on this channel, just stop that sample. Okay. So this is the basic behavior we need for our sample player. So let's go ahead and save that scene. Let's close all of these files here. And we'll close that one, and last but not least that one, so we'll be back to them all closed. I thought I saved it, but maybe I didn't. Let's save the scene, and let's close the scene. Yes. Okay. So now let's load the main scene, our Sound Blaster 84 main scene. Okay. And in here we need to add the sound scene that we just created. So let's go ahead and make sure our SB84 root is selected and click plus and go to sound and add the sound scene. And it adds the sample player scene down at the bottom. We're just going to use the arrows to move it up to the top. I like to see it up at the top. No real reason for it to be up there other than I like to see the sample player up at the top. Alright, the next thing that we'll do is we will open the laser scene. We'll go to the laser scene. We'll open the laser scene and we'll click on the script for the laser root. And the only thing we have to add to get a laser sound, firing of the laser, is whenever we create a new laser and the function ready is called, well then we want to trigger the laser sound, right? So you'll see here that I've added a line that's going to set the global parameter trigger laser sound to true every time we create a new laser. Okay, so that's the only thing we have to do to hear the lasers in the scene. So let's go ahead and close that. Let's basically close everything again, and we'll load up the rock scene next. We'll start with the large rock L scene. We'll click on the script to bring it up. So the only line that has been added to the large, medium, and small rock scenes is line number 20, where we're setting the global parameter trigger rock sound to true. And so if the durability of a rock reaches 0, that is, we hit it with the laser, in this case we hit it 3 times to bring the durability down to 0, and when it hits 0, trigger the rock explosion sound, make it true, and of course add your points and then remove the rock from the scene. And you will see this behavior. We'll open the medium rock scene. You'll see that I've added it into the medium rock scene as well on line number 20, globals set, trigger rock sound to true. And one more, open the scene, the small rock scene, hit the script, and you see that on line 20 again, there's your setting of the global parameter trigger rock sound to true. Okay. So that will take care of the rocks. When the laser blows up the rocks, then it will trigger the rock sound. It won't trigger the rock sound though if the ship actually collides with the rock, so we'll have to fix that too. So let's do that next. Let's close all these scenes. And close all of these scripts. And let's open up the main scene again, because that'll have our ship in it. We can edit the ship from there. So there's our ship root here, and we need to edit the script in the kinematic body of the ship. So let's go ahead and hit that script. The only thing we need to put in here is down near line 65. Whenever the ship is colliding, we know that the ship is colliding with a rock, right? So we need to, on the very next line, line number 65, we need to add a line that's going to set the trigger rock sound global parameter to true. Basically saying, hey, I need an explosion sound because my spaceship just hit the rock. Okay? So we've added sound to the laser. We've added sound to all three of the large, medium, and small rock scene. And we've added sound to the ship when it collides with the rock. That should be everything we need to hear all of the sound we need in the game. So let's go ahead and see if that's true. Let's run the SB84 main scene here. And I do hear music playing. Let me turn up my sound just a little bit so I can hear it. Okay. And let's close this. Expand that. Now let's hit the enter key. Oh, and I don't hear thrust on the engine because we didn't add it yet. So we need to add the thrust to the engine. And it looks like I've already set that right here to true. So I don't know exactly how I did that, but I don't see the main sound scene in here. So that's interesting. Let's go ahead and add that to make sure SB84 root is in there. Let's hit the plus sign and let's add the sound scene. There's the sample player. Let's move that up to the top. Maybe I messed up when I saved some stuff. But yeah, so now the sample player's in there. It should actually I should actually hear some sound now. So let's go ahead and check that out. Yeah, there we go. There's the thrust sound. There's the laser sound. There's your explosions when the rocks actually reach their zero value there. So let me should be able to turn mine down. Yeah. And it explodes when you hit it. So yeah, that's all we need to incorporate sound in our game. We are good to go. So the next video will be on the special effects, the particle effects for the thrust for the ship and for the rocks themselves. You'll see some fire when the rocks actually explode, and that'll be it. We'll be done with this game, so I'll see you in the next video.